This is Craig Berkman and Alma Robinson, and it's going to be a really exciting talk for everybody listening. Craig and Alma, first of all, it's an honor to have you on. I'm happy we met, and I look forward to having you on, obviously today, but many other times.
Well, thank you so much, Robert.
Thank you, Rob. Thanks, Rob, for having me. I'm the director of California Lawyers for the Arts. And Craig and I teamed up about a year ago because I had been working with justice advocates around the country to try and expand arts programs in prisons, which is a very successful program in California. We did several demonstration projects 10 years ago and showed how people are rehabilitated through engagement with the arts. And what I personally learned was how much potential we have locked up in our prisons and jails, how much severe time people are spending. And the forced labor issue is something that is really inhumane. We talk about human rights violations around the world, as Craig said, but it's right here in our backyard, in every state. And the federal government also is taking advantage of free, in some cases, prisoners are paid nothing. Often it's $1 an hour or $1.90 a day. And private corporations are manufacturing goods, which are then sold in interstate commerce. It's exactly what we're criticizing China for. And we really need to take a look in the mirror and see what's happening in the United States. So there are efforts to change this constitutional amendment with a new amendment that would eliminate that exception clause.
Can you talk about how hard it is to get this change? Do you think it's going to be hard? Are you talking to a lot of people in Congress, in the states in general, to try to pump up this effort?
Well, one thing I'd like to point out is that 3 states in the past 4 years have changed their state constitutions. This language exists in many states as well.
Right.
Utah, Nebraska, and Colorado changed their state constitutions to eliminate the exception clause. And so there is a growing movement, and you can regard these as middle of the road states or more conservative states or purple or red, but it's coming from a direction that you might not expect. And so with that momentum, we're hopeful that we can get the 2/3 majority in the House and the Senate to pass a resolution that would be a new amendment. And then it would have to be approved by 3/4 of the states, state legislatures. So you're right, it's certainly an uphill drive, but I think people need to be educated on it. And I'm really thankful for you for helping us build the awareness of this issue.
And to your point, Rob, Alma just described the 3 states that got it out of their respective constitutions. It's fascinating to know that it was viewed as a nonpartisan issue in their respective state legislatures. And there wasn't one dissenting vote. There might have been somebody who voted present or who was ill and wasn't able to vote, but all those who cast a vote in those state legislatures cast an affirmative vote to get rid of the slavery clause out of their state constitution. And the voters of those states, as Alma pointed out, these are 2 red states in Nebraska and Utah, and Colorado is kind of viewed as a purple state because it kind of goes back and forth. The voters overwhelmingly, 70+% said, this is wrong. We want to make sure that our state is not a slave state. And there's that momentum that Alma talked about is continuing this year in that there are 4 states that are actively working on the issue. One of them, the state of Oregon, has already passed it out of the legislature. The governor has signed it, so it will be on the Oregon ballot this November. And 3 other states, Tennessee, Michigan, and California, have active programs underway. And hopefully all 3 of those states will have it on their ballots as well. So that's a case of some growing momentum at the grassroots level which we think would be also helpful to members of Congress who will see that this is politically not only the right thing to do, but it's also very little political risk to, irrespective of your political party affiliation or your philosophical orientation. Most people who look at this say, this is just wrong. Slavery should not be part of the basic governing document of the United States, the US Constitution.
So wouldn't you say it's better rather to form this as a ballot initiative? Because it seems like you said, when it's on the ballot, it gets passed. I know it's only the state constitution, but go ahead.
Yes, the only way you can amend the Constitution is, there are two ways. Either the Congress itself has to do it, as Alma said, with a 2/3 vote in each chamber, or you can have a constitutional convention. Well, we haven't had a constitutional convention since we had the first one. And while there have been lots of attempts to do that, good luck with that, because once you convene a constitutional convention, you could have all sorts of issues come up, that most of which would probably be not in the best interest of our nation. So the cleanest way to do this is for members of the House and the Senate, many of whom we believe are very much supportive of this as well, to get this introduced and then have the hearings conducted in the respective judiciary committees of the House and the Senate, and then get it to a floor vote. And I think if it gets to the floor, it will pass overwhelmingly in the US Congress, just as it has in every state legislature that's dealt with it.
So there's a lot of private prisons in this country now. How would that affect it?
It would affect private prisons as well as those that are public. And it opens up a door also for one of the best things, which I think the taxpayers would support. And again, I think members of Congress and legislatures would support. Right now, all of the prison industrial complex is paid for by the taxpayer. And in round figures, that's $80 billion a year. So it's nothing more than an extension of the welfare state in the United States. If this measure were to pass, and there could be contractual obligations entered into with the private sector, who could go in and train with the support and of the prison officials, train prisoners in good jobs. Then after they've certified their training, hire them and have them work while they're incarcerated. And part of their money could be used to pay back the taxpayer for their board and room and healthcare and things of that nature while they're incarcerated. Some of it could be set aside in kind of a savings project for them. But most importantly, if they've done a good job for those private employers, they've got a much higher probability of having a job waiting for them when they get out. And the statistics are overwhelming that those who have jobs when they get out don't go back to prison, where a lot of them are, it's kind of like a revolving door, and they're out, and maybe within a year or two, they're right behind bars again because they don't have the skills to earn a living, and they go back into a life of crime.
Are we talking about, go ahead, I'm sorry.
That's all right. What Craig has touched on is a growing movement towards rehabilitation,
right,
in order to reduce recidivism and to help people become taxpayers when they get out, support their families, support the community, be a good guy, as Craig is demonstrating himself. And he started this coalition. He's the founder. He started it 3 years ago, and it has a growing presence. We have attracted some faith-based leaders, national leaders, and there are other nonprofit organizations around the country that are working on this. We've gotten support from the Art for Justice Fund to create a series of videos that will be produced with well-known celebrities. And so we hope to make a really big impact in terms of public awareness so that people will call their senators and representatives in Congress. And I hope those of you that are listening today will do that. Just pick up the phone and call these folks and tell them that you need them to be on board to change out the 13th Amendment.
Again, for people that are listening, Alma Robinson, Craig Berkman, freeatlastcoalition.org, freeatlastcoalition.org. Definitely check it out. I just wanted to go into this because, and I do have a question for you, Alma, but just to go back and whoever wants to answer this too, but I guess Craig, you are more so talking about this. So is this mostly going to be drug offenders that we're going to try to bring out as far as you, like you were saying, to work in certain atmospheres and then get paid?
Well, you'd be surprised to know this, but
Okay.
there's an amazing number of long-haul truck drivers in the United States who are former prisoners.
Mhm.
And some of the companies they work for, from like UPS and Federal Express, to give you
Good
two
jobs.
examples, they will tell you that they are some of their best workers.
Yeah.
And they've been very key to keeping our supply chain open. Without those truckers, nothing moves around the country, you know? They're and probably 97 to 98% of the people incarcerated will come back to the community at some point in time. They're not there for life. And a lot of them will come out and they'll be on parole. And unfortunately, most of them that are in there, a vast majority of people incarcerated today are in there for drug-related offenses.
Mhm.
They may have been a mule. They weren't a drug lord or anything like that we've read so much about, but they got caught up in that melees, and so that's while they're incarcerated. Most of them have never been involved with had a criminal past in the before. And these are not people who are involved in assaulting people and robbing people at gunpoint and that you see so much on television. But nevertheless, they need to be able to support their family, and most importantly, to have the human dignity that their work is worth something. It has some value. When you lose your freedom, you're separated from your family, your brothers, your sisters, your mother, your father, your grandchildren, and then you're told that your work has no value. That is just a further dehumanization that I think most thoughtful people would say, that's not right, and we need to try to change that.
So, Alma, what would you say to these people that, and there are these people that, are not humane, that they think of prisoners as just evil people, regardless of the crime that they, went to prison for. And they say, screw them. They're in prison. They did something wrong. If they work for $2 an hour or $1 an hour, that's their problem. What would you say to those people?
Well, I would say think on a community level, on a spiritual level.
Mm-hmm.
Think about all the people that you know who probably have a relative who's incarcerated. We have 2 million people incarcerated in the United States, more than any country in the world. And our criminal justice system has so many gaps and imperfections. Think about how people plead guilty because they're going to get a lesser sentence than taking the trial, taking the chance on going to trial. So we are churning people through this system, oftentimes without an effective way for them to get defense. 97% of people who are accused of crimes who end up incarcerated don't have a trial. And so we're bargaining with people's liberty, and then they get inside. Very seldom do they have opportunities for rehabilitation, although it's increasing now. We are seeing in California more programs like the one I mentioned, which is arts programs and corrections, more higher education programs for people, so that when they come out, they're going to be different rather than coming out and being worse. When we started our rehabilitation program with the arts 10 years ago, the recidivism rate in California was 70%. Now it's down to 50%, which is still a lot. But if you can bring people out and give them something, some training, some incentives to be good citizens when they come out, that would be the desired path. It would be, we would have safer communities, healthier families, and less recidivism, less crime.
I'll leave you with one other thing before we go.
Yeah, sure thing.
There's a new book out called The New Jim Crow.
Mm-hmm.
And most people don't realize this, that we've criminalized so many things in the United States and gotten rid of mens rea, which means you had to have a mental intent to break the law. So if you break it, you're automatically guilty. That the average person, including members of the US Supreme Court, is breaking 3 criminal statutes a day in the United States. That's everybody.
I want to go into this question, and I think this, since you're in California, Alma, I think this will be up your alley because I've heard a lot about this as a person that's involved in politics and follows it like peanut butter and jelly. We've heard a lot about the forest fires in California and how they're fought by prisoners that are getting paid about $2 an hour. These men and women are putting their lives on the line to fight forest fires every year and extreme fires. I mean, these things are, knocking down people's homes. They're killing people in general, killing animals, destroying our environment. Can you talk about that and how that's extremely scary? But I was also told that the vice president was, when she was attorney general, was big and involved in that.
I'm not sure. That program has been going in California for decades.
Okay.
And they had about 200 people around the state working in fire brigades, and they were trained and they were being paid minimally, like you mentioned. And just last year, Governor Gavin Newsom signed legislation that would allow them to become firefighters professionally when they come out. Because people were coming out and they couldn't get a job as a firefighter because they couldn't get the EMT license because of having had a criminal history. And so now he's allowing people who served honorably in the field to expunge their records so they can become employed as firefighters.
Is this what you're saying? If they fight these fires and, they live for another day, that their record gets expunged fairly quickly, or?
Well, if they, there's a lot of different factors involved in early release, but working and serving in that way might inspire a parole board to release you earlier. And then there was other early release going on because of COVID. So people who had, say, nonviolent offenses that had good behavior, a lot of folks were let out early in the past 2 years because of the COVID pandemic. And some of those were firefighters. So the actual force of people who are incarcerated has actually dropped to something like less than 150 or so because of early release. I'm not sure what Kamala Harris how she was involved in this.
Well, I know a little bit, unfortunately, I know a little bit about that.
Okay.
When she was the Attorney General of California, she resisted allowing any early release of firefighters because she knew they couldn't join the firefighters when they were out for the reasons that Alma just described. And so she wanted to keep them in prison so they could continue to work as slaves, according to the San Francisco Chronicle. And here's the other fiction about this. Almost a third of the people actually fighting firefighters in California have been people who are incarcerated. 30% of all the people fighting those firefighters. And if you're outside and being paid, a lot of those firefighters get close to $100,000 a year, and you're working side by side with somebody else who's getting paid $1 an hour or $2 a day, putting their life on the line. And as Alma said, and even if they come out and want to be a firefighter, they were precluded because of their criminal record of becoming an EMT. So it's still complicated. And if I can just move very quickly to give you another example of how this really works, almost like it did in the Civil War, there's an article called American Slavery Reinvented. And in Louisiana, at their largest state federal penitentiary, which was a former plantation, there are guards on horseback with their rifles having people picking cotton, and you're given a quota of so much cotton to pick a day. And if you don't pick that cotton and you're not paid anything, and this is at Angola State Prison, you're put in solitary confinement. So it's just like it was during the slave days 150 years ago. And that's going on as we speak today. That hasn't changed.
I want to ask you this because our country is kind of out of control in this way. After 9/11, we saw the surveillance state. Now we see the mandates. Now we see the censorship online. And this is all, it's not just conservatives, there's liberals too that are facing these issues too. So we're seeing it on both sides. Are you worried about this in our country, that this is still, these things are going on and it seems like it's getting worse as far as civil liberties go instead of better?
Well, you know, someone once said a long time ago, the line between civilization and anarchy is very thin.
Yeah.
And when Thomas Jefferson was actually leaving the Constitutional Convention, I think he was asked by somebody, "What have you given us?" He says, "We've given you a republic, you know, if we can keep it." So the battle for the soul of America is generation after generation. And I'm an optimist. There are millions and millions and millions of very decent people in the United States who have a perspective about life and what's really important in life: family, friendship, integrity, all the things that make for a just and orderly society. And what we really need is leadership, and we need an issue that can draw people together. And I may sound like I'm a Pollyanna here, but this issue of ending the official legal justification of slavery in America is something that both political parties, whether you're from a rural state, from an urban area, you're a liberal, you're a conservative, you're a Democrat, you're an independent, you're a Republican, this is the kind of issue that could bring us together. And once we're brought together on one issue, it becomes easier to find common ground to do other things that we all need as a nation. And if we don't do this, then we just are in a further downward spiral, and we can't go off lecturing China and other countries in the world about their human rights abuses when we're doing the very same thing in spades in the United States. We can't talk out of both sides of our mouth. And I think most of the American public, including your audience, is probably surprised, if not shocked, about the conversation we're having today. They had no idea that the United States Constitution still justifies human slavery in the United States.
I know you wanted to make another point.
I do. Thank you, Rob. I just have to wear my arts advocate hat and support arts education for all. Yes, everybody who studies theater is not going to become a professional actor. It's true. And many people struggle with their mission, their life mission, their passion. But in any case, it's so important to have the humanities and the arts in your education. Whether you're going to be a computer scientist or a firefighter, it's important to be literate and to have empathy. These are things that come out of studying literature and theater. And there's the discipline of playing music. Everybody's not going to be a professional musician, but you learn how to work as a team. You learn how to listen. And so I just want to stand up for arts education, and it's a requirement in California in colleges, and we certainly want to make sure that people continue to value the arts. And that's what we found out about arts in prisons. There's a wonderful example of a man who was incarcerated in Solano State Prison in California. He had never studied Shakespeare. He had a Shakespeare class and became totally fascinated with it, came out, and he's the first resident artist at Shakespeare, at the Marin Shakespeare Company, teaches acting classes in the juvenile hall in Solano County, continues to give back to the community, and he's a wonderful actor. He's gotten accolades. He's unusual, but I do want to make the point that a lot of people have potential.
Right.
And through the arts, they learn expression. I've heard many people say it's a lot better than taking anger management class because you're writing out your anger and you're learning things about yourself, as you just mentioned. So we had a wonderful experience with Arts and Corrections in California. Now it's an $8 million program in all 35 state prisons. When we started, there was no funding for it.
So as we go to the end with the last two questions, what do you guys hope that people learn from this interview?
Well, I'm going to be very direct. Once you know that slavery is still legally justified in the country, you have a choice. You just sort of shrug your shoulders and say, well, that's somebody else's problem. Yeah. Or you say, you know, I want to be part of the solution. And it's a moral issue, it's a human rights issue, and it's frankly a practical economic issue. And let me come back and say amen to what Alma was talking about arts in the prisons. Alma shared with me last night that she was involved, and I know I did this when I was in prison, involved in singing. And when you hear some men and women who are incarcerated sing, for a lot of people, unless you're really cold-hearted, it'll bring tears to your eyes, that they still can raise their voices, whether it's in a chapel service, or whether it's in a talent show, or whether it's just being able to sing maybe with a family member or somebody from the outside who's given the privilege to come to see them. And frankly, there are people who are guards and nurses and people who actually work for the prison system. Their lives are enriched by it as well. And frankly, thankfully, in a lot of prisons, there is the opportunity for music as it relates to worship and other forms of expressing yourself musically. So I just want to say that Alma's spot on with all that.
Well, thank you, Craig. And I hope that the listeners will take action, will pick up the phone or send an email, go to freeatlastcoalition.org and look at some other resources that we've put on the website and get involved with this. It's a very important issue. And, you know, it's not too late to correct our Constitution.
My last question is, where can people get involved? I know freeatlastcoalition.org, you know, they can go on there and find more information, but can they go on there and figure out how they can get involved besides the emails and the phone calls?
Yes, they can sign a petition and provide us their email information. We've not solicited this, but we've had some people who said, I want to be part of this, and here's a tangible way I can show that. And they've decided to have $25 taken out of their check each month to donate to the coalition. So there's a whole variety of ways we can do that. But as Alma said, the most effective way would be just to share the word, pass it along, and also reach out to members of their congressional delegations and even their state members, particularly if you live in California, Tennessee, and Michigan, because those states are considering getting rid of it out of the state constitution. And all the work that's done at the states, trust me, will be noticed by those in Congress because it helps to reduce the supposedly political risk of their doing it at the national level.
Any last words?
Well, I want to really thank you for giving us the opportunity to talk about this to your audience, Rob. And it's really been a pleasure working with Craig for the last year. We've had some amazing adventures together and hope to see change in our lifetime. You know, it's when the Congress amended the Constitution for prohibition, just a few years after that, they did another amendment and changed that because it was very, it was a clear and present danger to have everybody underground selling liquor. So that took less than 10 years. Now we're talking about an amendment that has been in place since 1865. So it's time to change this.
Alma Robinson, Craig Berkman, again, Definitely check them out. And the website is freeatlastcoalition.org, freeatlastcoalition.org. Guys, thanks so much. Let's do this again down the road, please.
Thank
Thank
you.
you
Rob.
again.
We'll stay in
And
touch with you, and I hope you feel better soon.
All right, thank you.